Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Better Together webinar. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today, and no matter where you are in the world, we hope that you are both healthy and well. My name is Julian Lute, and I'm a strategic advisor for Great Place to Work. I'm also here to facilitate our time together and pose questions to our leaders on your behalf. Now, this week's Better Together conversation could not be more timely. The events of the past month, let alone the past week, have left many simultaneously emotionally charged and emotionally drained. Later on, the ongoing health and economic impacts of COVID-19, the very visible specter of racism, families navigating returning to work, and children to school, we have a perfect opportunity to lead with both empathy and accountability. And we continue to be inspired by leaders who are digging a little deeper, listening more closely to their people, and taking decisive, bold action. So we trust that this week's conversation will help illuminate a path forward and showcase how we can make the changes necessary, even though they may feel impossible, both possible and necessary for today. A few housekeeping notes. We look forward to your participation, so please submit your questions in the questions panel. Our colleagues will field the questions and we'll do our best to cover them during the Q&A. We'll also be recording the session, so we'll send along the deck and the recording within 48 hours. Building a future for all can only be achieved through bold leadership, and our speaker today consistently inspires leaders around the world. I'm incredibly honored to introduce Tim Ryan, the U.S. Chair and Senior Partner of PwC, where he is responsible for leading not only the U.S. firm and its approximately 55,000 people, but also serves as Asian Pacific America's leader. Tim is also the co-founder of CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, the largest ever CEO-driven business commitment to advance diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And in another act of bold, transparent leadership this week, PwC released their first diversity report, which shares their successes and opportunities where diversity, equity, and inclusion is concerned. And in terms of creating a great workplace for employees, PwC has appeared on every 100 best list since 2005. That's 16 wins in a row. PwC has also been recognized as a best workplace across the US in their industry, for parents, for their size, and for diversity. Just in 2020, PwC has been recognized as number 36 in Fortune 100 best companies to work for, number 5 in Fortune's best big companies to work for, number 30 in Fortune best companies in New York, number 17 in Great Place to Work's best workplaces in Chicago, and number 6 in Great Place to Work's best workplaces in consulting and professional services. Tim will be joined today in conversation by our CEO, Michael Bush. I want to thank both of you for joining us today. And without any further ado, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Julian, thank you very much. Well done, by the way. And we want to start, or where we always start, which is talking about the mission of Great Place to Work. Our mission is to help organizations like yours become a great place to work for all. And we emphasize the for all. And the reason that we do it, you can go to the next slide, is one of the things that we know is that when you've got, in normal times, it's important for a workplace to be a great place to work for all. But during times of crisis, it's especially important. And that's because, the next slide, organizations that are great places to work for all outperform those who are not. And we've been through recessions and tough times before. We're a data analytics firm. We've managed to keep track of the employee experience and how companies are performing through tough times. And what the data says is that companies that are great places to work for all, that are creating environments that capture the growing potential of all of their employees, financially do better. So not only is being a great place to work for all a great thing to do in terms of making you feel good or serving society in an appropriate way, it's the best way to make money and the best way to grow. So that's why we're here. And today we'll be focusing with Tim Ryan on what they're doing at PwC to be a great place to work for all. And as we know, it's better for business, better for people, and better for the world. So certainly happy to be joined by Tim. Tim's a person who I met really related to this topic of diversity and inclusion. It's not new for him. So to get get us started, Tim, if you could let our audience know about PwC and the work of PwC to set that context.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and to all of your listeners and people viewing the webcast. Thank you very much for joining. And like Julian, I hope everybody is okay. I hope your families and friends are safe. I hope you're coping as best you can in these challenging times. And thank you for inspiring others also during these challenging times. Michael, a little bit about PwC. As Julian said, in the US, we're about 55,000 people. Globally, we're about 270,000 people. I used to tell people prior to the pandemic, I'd spend a typical week, I'd be in 4 or 5 different cities, maybe two or three different countries on a weekly basis. I was a true road warrior. That's clearly changed. But the reason for that is we're a people business. And even though we have many different lines of businesses, at the end of the day, our people are charged with delivering our purpose, which is to build trust in society and to solve important problems. We do that through our auditing business. We have a world-class tax business, and we have a world-class advisory business where we help our clients to do that. Anytime we attack a problem or we try to do something, we've consistently tried to do things through that lens of that purpose. And whether it be a client problem or important opportunities like diversity and inclusion, we approach it through our purpose first. So a little bit at us, we're 160 years old in the United States, and we're trying to make the right decisions and make sure we continue to be relevant for the next 100 years as well.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Yeah, 160 years old, so an overnight success.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're going to talk about really the 2 viruses that are facing the world today, COVID-19 and racism. So, because it's on the hearts and minds of everyone. So, but starting with COVID, you know, just thinking about, you know, the shock of the experience. What have you done for your people, focusing on your people to help them make this transition to a new way of working, you know, and something that we all thought would be a month or 2, that's become much longer. What have you done to, number 1, support your people, and then number 2, support your customers?
Yes, thank you, Michael. And I'll actually, as I answer that, I'd like to go back to mid-March, when we were all sitting there in mid-March. And frankly, none of us had, certainly on my team and we had no idea that this would be going on this long. But what we knew in March is there was a lot of fear out there, and people were very concerned. And at the time, we didn't not only know we didn't have certainty about our health, there was also large concern about jobs and security. And next to health, people were concerned about their financial security. One of the things that my team and I did with the full support of our board is we came out in mid to late March very quickly, and we said to our employees, and this goes right back to our purpose, I said to our employees, I wish we could put our arms around you and tell you everything's going to be okay, but we can't. Like, we're not doctors, we're not pharmaceutical companies. And we said we can't solve the health issues other than saying we're shutting down and we're not traveling, and we want people to work from home. But what we can do is bring certainty on the next most important issue, which is job security, financial security. And we promised our people we would do layoffs as a last resort. And we said that at the time, not knowing how long the pandemic would go, how deep it would go, what the effects of the business would be on it. And we needed to do that because it's who we are. And we, as a partner-led organization, we feel a responsibility to look after our people. And I'm happy to tell you, to date, we've been able to stick to that. Notwithstanding the times are a bit challenging. So one of the first things we did out of the chute is we brought certainty to where we could bring certainty. And knowing that every one of our people has some type of family member or friend that they're trying to support and take care of, and we wanted to help them there. So out of the chute, that was something we did that we were very proud of. Then what we've been doing over the last several months is constantly listening to what's on the minds of our people. So no surprise to your listeners, but as this pandemic has continued, issues like knowing, when am I going to come back to work? Am I going to be forced to come back to work? And we've consistently said we're going to go slow, we're going to follow the data, nobody has to rush back to work, and we're still now working 99% remotely and very effectively. So we've made it clear there's no pressure. We've also materially increased our mental health benefits for our people, because as we know, these are challenges, and mental health is always a serious issue that's been on our strategy and something we're focused on. And this time it's incredibly important, and we've significantly increased our benefits, and we've been increasing our benefits across the board to support our people. We're meeting on a every other week basis with all 55,000 of our people. We're telling stories, sharing examples. I've been very open with our people. I have 6 children, 2 of mine are using our mental health benefits. Like we need to talk about it. We need to reduce the stigma and let people know it's okay to ask for help. So we have a combination of financial security, combination of increasing our benefits, and then also setting the clear tone from the top. It's okay to ask for help because it's really important. On the customer side, equally, every one of our clients is in a very different spot. What we've said to our clients is we know and we believe your safety and our safety should come first. And we've told our clients we're prepared to meet them wherever they need to be met. And because of the investments we've made in technology, we're able to do that virtually and do that very effectively with some of the investments we've made over the last couple of years. And that's really important to our clients to know that we can meet their needs without necessarily being there physically, because it's not possible right now. We've also shared our intellectual property very broadly. So a big topic that has been out there for the last several years is digital well-being and keeping up with the skill set. We had been selling a lot of our digital skills to our customers, and we made the decision in April to share those broadly for free with society, not only our clients, with the society at large. So we have a digital fitness app that can help anybody who wants to use it to go on their own digital journey to raise their digital IQ. And we now have over 350,000 users because we gave it away for free because we wanted to help our clients in our communities.
Well, that's better for the world. And Tim, the thing that just stood out for me, 2 things stood out for me, as I was listening. Number one, the speed of the decision making based on purpose and values. Yeah. Because I think that if you've got an Excel spreadsheet around and you're using it to make decisions, now isn't the time that you increase your benefits.
Yeah.
Excel will tell you absolutely don't do that. But when you're leading with your purpose, and your values, you do what's right, which is that critical moment where it's either you're people first or you aren't. So great to hear about that. The other thing is 6 children,
Yes.
So I just kind of like froze right there. And then just also thought about, probably a silver lining has been your ability to connect, spend more time, with them. And then the other is just being open about having 6 children and having mental health being a part of your family as it is mine. So setting that tone for your leaders, setting that tone for your mid-level managers, setting that tone for your supervisors, that it's okay to be a human being and talk about these things. And matter of fact, it's more than okay. There's an expectation that you'll do it so that you can create an environment where everybody feels that they can bring their whole selves to work and talk about all parts of themselves without any penalty or limitation being placed on them. Because if you can have 6 kids, and have the normal issues of human beings and be where you are, they can too. So all of that is what we talk about and what we hope all of our leaders are communicating.
And hey, Michael, can I just say something? So I'm actually doing this from my office, which is my daughter's bedroom. So for the last 5 months, my daughter has gracefully during the day given up her bedroom while she goes to work at the supermarket where she works, given the pandemic. So I think it's really important for us to be human, and we have to as leaders, we deal with the same challenges that everybody else does. Now, I don't mean to imply we all have different challenges, but whether it be mental health, anxiety, am I going back to school? What's the experience going to be like? Am I going to be safe? Am I going to catch the virus? What's the future going to look like? Those are dialogues that are happening on a daily basis in my home, and I don't have all the answers. And I think it's important for all of our leaders to be humble and approachable, and they're not have like we got all the answers and everything's going to be okay. We need to provide assurance and confidence, but at the same time be humble. I do want to just comment on your spreadsheet comment. I could not agree more. One of the biggest things about leadership is making decisions with half the facts. Like you're never going to have all the facts to know, and you need to have a North Star. And for us, our North Star is our purpose. I would encourage that. I think running any organization with a bottom line is important, but it's not the only thing that's important. The thing that is incredibly important as a leader is to get many data points and get the quantitative data points and the qualitative data points. And for us, there was never a doubt that we were going to put our proverbial arms around our people and do everything we can. But I applaud your comment. Like leadership can't be spreadsheet driven.
Well, I just got a text from your daughter, and she says, leave the room cleaner than you found it. And about $300 is actually her ask for, the lease rate for today. So, we'll see how you handle that. But, thank you for that. So Tim, this is, I think like no one else that I know in terms of executives, being out in front of what's going on in society, and not just recently, but you've been there. So, you started CEO Action for diversity and inclusion based on an event that happened in society. I'd like you to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then in addition, here we are, with George Floyd's murder and Jacob Blake's shooting, which I saw you immediately put out a Twitter, a Twitter post on your point of view. You didn't take it to your board. You didn't have committees review it. You just put it out. So that's where you are in your journey. But if you could take us through and let people know something about CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion and the 1,200 people who have joined that effort with you and the founding members, and then George Floyd and now Jacob Blake, and our responsibility, the role of business to be a force for good.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I'll pause a couple of points along the way because it's a 4-year journey. So I had the privilege of being elected senior partner in the spring of 2016. My first week on the job was the first week in July. We have a fiscal year, July 1 to June 30th. The first week in July of 2016, if any of us recall, that's when we had shootings in Dallas with police involved. That was on the heels of Minneapolis. That was on the heels of Louisiana. So we were in a very tense time in our country at that point in time. It was at that moment, 5 days into my role as CEO, where I understood that we had a bigger mission than just delivering increased revenues and a better profit, which frankly was my plan. I'll be honest, that was my plan coming in. I thought it was a really good plan, by the way, but I realized 5 days into my role that was not the case, because I began to listen to our people. And one person sent me an email on that Friday, and they said, when I came to work, the silence was deafening. And I'll share with you a very important lesson for me. I understood on that day that we can have the best strategy in the world, and we can have 100% physical attendance of people showing up for work. But if you don't have mental commitment and attention, you're fooling yourselves. Our attendance was really high, but people were showing up to work, and their mind wasn't on work. Their mind was on what was happening in the news. Their mind was what was happening at home. Their mind was what was happening with their children and their safety. And so for me and my team, we pivoted the strategy. We literally 5 days in, we pivoted the strategy. We then 3 weeks later held PwC's first day-long discussion on race, July 21, 2016. We shut our firm down, and we had discussions all across the country on the topic of race, which again, if you put yourselves back in that time, it was a very raw and emotional topic. It was a risky move for somebody who was 3 weeks into the role. It could have gone very bad, and it went very well. And what we learned in many respects is what much of America is working now with George Floyd's video everywhere you go, and everybody seeing that travesty and that killing. We began to learn at PwC, we're no better than anybody. We just had a 4-year head start on having these conversations. And what we started having 4 years ago was these discussions. I did New York and Atlanta during that time period. And I learned that some of our Black professionals carry their PwC business card. So if they get pulled over, they can show that they afforded and could pay for the car and didn't steal it. I learned that some of our Black professionals at PwC, when they were leaving work to go to Central Park to play a softball game, I learned that they felt unsafe because they had a t-shirt with their tattoo showing and a baseball cap on. We learned that some of our Black professionals were teaching their children how to be pulled over. We learned what it was like to be white and struggling with the fact that you had a husband or a relative who was a police person who was good, and yet you didn't condone the shootings as well. We learned so much. And what, Michael, for us, what it did is it began another level of our journey. I called it the foundation. And the important thing was those conversations weren't one and done. They continued. Now, you asked about CEO action. So on the evening of July 21st, I was leaving the office, and I honestly needed a breather. It was a very emotional day, and one of our Black professionals stopped me in the lobby that evening, and he said, "Thank you. I really appreciate it. Incredible day. Shed a lot of tears. But what's your role outside of PwC?" And I will admit, I was kind of like, oh, do I get a break? Is it like we just had this day? It could have gone bad. It went well. But the more I reflected on it that evening, he was right. He was right. Like when you have a brand like ours that only for a moment in time, I'm leading that brand, you have a responsibility to do more. And that ultimately led to the co-founding of CEO Action, which CEO Action is a community of CEOs that now are 1,200. When we launched, we had 112 that have come together to say CEO Action. That's the name of it. CEO because we own it. Like we own it. You, like any other business problem or opportunity, you fix it by the CEO. So we chose that term, CEO, and we chose action because we need to take more action to make sure we capture the opportunity of more diverse organizations, and we need to take more action to stop the problems. We started out with 112 companies. We're at 1,200 now. We asked every company to make 4 basic commitments. One is we asked them to commit to make the workplaces truly safe to have these hard conversations. Now, again, that was 4 years ago. The hard conversations that are taking place in our society now, we need to have those. That's why we landed on that, because we learn. And when we learn, we understand. When we understand, we can move from indifference to action. And so we've focused on, number 1, making the workplaces safe. Number 2, making unconscious bias training available to all employees, not just the executive team, because we all have biases, whether we like it or not. Doesn't make us a bad people. It only makes us bad if we don't act and understand those biases. Number 3, we ask companies to commit to share best practices. And on the CEO Action site, there's now 700 best practices that any company can go see, because diversity inclusion is not a it's not a competitive issue. It's a strategic opportunity for all. And lastly, we asked them to do an annual D&I strategic plan to be reviewed and approved by the board of directors of their company. Today, we have 1,200 members. We're very proud of pulling that group together, and we have a lot of activity. If any of your listeners can go look at the site, it's ceoaction.com, but we've been convening, mentoring, helping CEOs get better and better on this journey. So, Mike, I'll just pause there before I get to George Floyd and then what we did, but that's a little bit of history. I'm incredibly proud of the business community. Like, the business community has stepped up. Now, some more than others, clearly, but there's a clear sense over the last 4 years that CEOs need to own this issue. And what I'm encouraged by is the level of ownership that I've begun to see. At a personal level, I meet with 300 or 400 CEOs a year. I will tell you 70% of the time, they're asking, tell me more about diversity and inclusion. What do you see out there? What could we be doing better? What are some of the best practices that you see? What's PwC doing? So we're seeing a desire to learn how to get better at this, and we're getting in the weeds of things like recruiting, advancement, retention, et cetera. So hopefully we're having an impact to make a difference.
Well, you're definitely having an impact. But before, one thing I just wanted to, before going forward, Tim, let's take, because I think we can all learn from the following. As the U.S. chair, and you see a George Floyd murder, you see a Jacob Blake shooting. So that happens. Now, when you get the news that those things have happened, or you see the video, right before you see those things, you got a lot to do. You're a busy person with a lot of responsibility, and then this thing happens. And so it's personal, for sure, but then you got the responsibility to help 55,000 people who are also having an experience. Kind of what's your day like in terms of moving something positive and action oriented and providing mental health and support for your people? How do you move that through, so that it's just not you and your team, but it cascades through the company? What have you learned about trying to do that, and what can you share with our audience about how to do that?
Yeah, so great. That's a really important question, Michael, because many of us are at large organizations. So as you mentioned, we have 55,000 people. So many of us are at organizations that are in multiple geographies, multiple cities, multiple countries, multiple buildings. And so the ability to get 20 people in the room and have a personal connection is very difficult at scale. And so for us, everything we think about is scale. Every time we think about something. So I want to make a difference in everybody's lives, but in order to do that, you've got to think about scale. So for us, we have been intently focused on diversity, inclusion, social issues, no different than we would any other strategic priority. So if we're rolling out a new change in our firm, like a new system gets put in place or a new policy around risk management, we have a clear cadence of how we do that. We agree on it as an executive team, we test it, we make sure it solves the problem or is responsive. We then get the next level of management, explain why we're doing it. Then we get the next level and the next level. We do the same thing with our diversity and inclusion. So when we are putting in mental health benefits, or for what we did with our unconscious bias training is after getting many inputs from our underrepresented minorities, our majority groups, we tied it to promotion. We didn't make it required. We tied it to promotion. We debated that, got a lot of input. And then once we decided, we put it in our system the same way we would do any other business change in our firm. And so we explained to everybody going forward on July 1, this is 3 years ago, if anybody's going to come into the firm, they're going to be, we embedded in our learning and development, our onboarding, unconscious bias training is available. If anybody wants to get promoted to the next level, unconscious bias training is required. And the reason we did that, by the way, is you're leading people and you need to understand how to lead people and lead through your unconscious biases. So for us, and I think this is a really important question you asked me, it's not an appendage. It's like everything else we do. So what we do, we've learned, we made plenty of mistakes. We don't have diversity inclusion all over here and the business over here. It's one and the same. So when we're changing our benefits, so we recently in the last 2 months, with the whole concern about back to school and all parents, but most heavily burden on women, we debated, what do you do? Like, how do we support them? What can we do? And what we did is we decided to make a number of changes to our benefits and our programs, and we ran them through the business. Like we didn't do it off to the side where I would worry you don't get the real buy-in. We did it right through the business. So hopefully that helps and answers the question.
That does help. That's thorough, direct, and actionable.
Yeah.
So thank you for providing that to our audience. The back to the report, which I saw just yesterday that you released, which is letting the world know about what's going on within PwC, and this is a monumental move. This is bold. That in the report, which our audience, I'm sure you can find, or you can let people know how to find it. I was fortunate enough to, have it served up to me, and I, immediately read through it. It's laid out very well. The graphics are amazing. You can see the story. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and you're actually sharing what's going on within PwC. Not at the high level, you break it down, so that you could see the representation of underrepresented people through various levels of PwC, and for everyone to see. And two powerful things are happening that I haven't been in this business, and I just haven't seen this before. I've seen top level numbers for the firm, percentage of African Americans, percentage of Asians. I've seen that. I haven't seen the breakdown at levels, which you provided, and also new hires and people where you hire experienced people. You have that detail, and then you go to the very top and show what's happening at the very top. Because at a lot of the companies that we work with, people in the companies don't have that data. I mean, the employees don't have that data. So you went beyond that. So not only do your employees have it, you went to the outside and let people look through and get a window, knowing that if you don't measure it, you're not going to improve it. And now you're in a position where the public can hold you accountable. So I'd like you to talk about why you did it, because I think you're crazy in a good way, and also that back to the overnight success. These things, everybody wants the quick fix in this area. There's no other area of business where people ask me, Mike, how can we get a quick fix? It's only diversity and inclusion. You know, that people want a quick fix. And so just take us back to that decision. Also, you know, how you managed through reluctance in the firm, I'd say, you know, or perhaps resistance, and got everybody to know in terms of the purpose that this was a critical step.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, very, very much. So for the audience, on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, 2 days ago, we issued our first ever diversity inclusion strategic diversity inclusion transparency report. It is by far and away the most data any large other organization has disclosed. We disclosed 14 indicators that lay out where we are very transparently, no punches pulled, where we are and where we're not. In the report, one of the things that we talk about is we at PwC have been on a journey for 20 years, and it lays out our timeline, what we've been doing over the last 20 years. It would be completely untrue for me to say that I picked this up from scratch 4 years ago. I'm privileged to have two amazing leaders before me, and they're 8 and 8, so we do 8 years each. Where we've had now 20 years of leaders, successive leaders, driving us on this journey. I was privileged to pick it up, and there was a lot of spay work done. But clearly, every leader needs to take it to the next level. About 2 years ago, we made a decision that we were going to be transparent. It was a question of getting the data, deciding what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and to your point, Michael, letting people know, all of our stakeholders know why we believe it needed to be done, and why we ultimately were comfortable. But we made the decision 2 years ago that we were going to do that. Now, by the way, when George Floyd happened, we decided to accelerate that to this summer, because we anticipated that we wanted to get our data out so we could tell the story and let people see where we are, and hopefully have others follow. But it's been a decision that's 2 years in the making. So let me first go to your question about stakeholders, both inside the firm and outside the firm. Clearly, if we're going to have an honest conversation, some believe it's a good idea, some believe it's a bad idea. Ultimately, the CEO, the leader's got to make a decision. The people who thought it was a bad idea, it wasn't because they thought diversity inclusion was a bad thing, but our numbers aren't great. Like, our numbers aren't great. And so many would say, well, why would you disclose your numbers if they're not great? Well, I think a big part of why I want to get the numbers out there is because I view it as a catapult to the next level. I mean, the transparency up and down in our organization, the transparency outside of our organization, I want the pressure. Like, we need the pressure. I want the transparency, and that will be a big catapult. That's another one. The second one is our purpose is building trust in society and solving important problems. It's not building trust in society when it's convenient and solving important problems. Like, if we're serious about our purpose statement about building trust, we owe the world a transparent look as to where we are. And there's some things in the report I'm very proud of. When I look at recruiting, massive improvement over the last couple of years. When I look at my leadership team, when I look at where we've been on our most recent partner missions classes, there's some good news. But equally, there's some clear rooms for improvement around retention of talent, around the partners who serve our largest accounts. And we laid out both the good and major areas for improvement. But ultimately, in those stakeholder discussions, we weighed the risks and rewards. And ultimately, you have to have the courage to make a decision. Now, I'm lucky because I've got a really good team that helps me think through the pros and cons. And it made my decision easier because we all believe in our purpose and we all believe that it's the right thing to do. And I'm very hopeful that others where appropriate will follow. And I'm hopeful that will lead all of us to get even better and better, because the transparency is so compelling in terms of where we are and where we're not.
Well, number one, thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
you know, we're going to be promoting it. You know, we're going to be letting the world know about this best practice. We're getting asked a lot lately about the best practices. You've just established one. So it's going to help us, you know, not only are their employees going to be happy because they'd like to see the data, but you know, what's inside, you know, is really the branding that you want to push to the outside. So thanks for the transparency and giving us something to keep this movement going forward to create a great place to work for all. You know, one of the things, as I looked at that data, I immediately decided to take a look, you know, in more detail at your most recent survey data with us. And there are some things, you know, that I found that were, you know, while, you know, you have work to do just like everybody else, but some things that were, to me, remarkable in terms of having 55,000 people. You know, that one of the questions we ask is about the training and learning environment, for people, and we look at that by demographic group. And what we found is that in terms of gender experience at PwC, it's equal. It's equal, you know, so that's in terms of training and development. That's in terms of executives asking us for ideas and caring about our ideas. It's equal. And we ask a question about, do the executives of the company embody the values, purpose, and characteristics of a purpose-driven leader? It's identical, 89 to 87. And whether or not you feel the firm is working to leave no one behind, again, identical. So in terms of gender balance, you know, with all that's going on, you're achieving that. And then I took a look at really what's going on around Black employees compared to everybody else. And in terms of innovation by all, feeling that the culture is people are willing to give more, which is required to innovate, and believing that the service that your customers experience, 93% of the people, Black employees, said the service is excellent compared to 92% for majority employees. So, you know, you've got a situation where the for all is happening. That's why you're on our list. The for all is happening. It is happening, and you're putting a spotlight on the area of, I believe, of improvement. You've created an environment that's inclusive, where people feel like they belong, but in order to make them feel more included and you know, increase their sense of belonging, it's representation. You know, it's representation. And people ask us, well, you know, there's a lot to be discussed around inclusion and belonging, but promotions matter. Promotions, you know, absolutely matter. That's how you really fill in. It's not the Black History Month celebration. It's are Black people getting promoted? Are underrepresented people getting promoted? And one point that I wanted to make, you know, as you know, when you say Black too many times, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And the reason that I say Black and emphasize it is, if you take a look through our database, you know, we survey 10 million employees a year. 1.5 million of them are Black, African American, and you rank the work experience by ethnicity and race. At the very bottom, having the worst work experience is Black women. Above that is Black men. So that's the way it is. So that's the reason I talk about it, because I go right to who's having the toughest experience, who is the group that needs to be lifted to have a more equal experience. The data set is what it is. It's not my personal opinion. The data is clear. We have all the data. And so this is where you go, because if you can go and lift people who are at the bottom, you know, having the inferior experience, it lifts everyone. It absolutely mathematically lifts everyone. You know, this is not just a theoretical, metaphorical statement. You know, it's actually the facts. So with what you're creating, and hopefully for everybody listening, this inclusion and belonging matters, diversity matters too. That's why I like how what CEO action for diversity and inclusion, because at the time that you did that, people were hesitant to say diversity. there was a movement in the world to say inclusion, belonging, anything but diversity, because diversity gets the numbers. And people wanted to shy away from it and find something else to celebrate and talk about. You hit it head on. You know, first of all, action. So if you're not serious about action, don't sign up. And then two, you went right to the D word, and then you know, created that opportunity. And so, you know, where you're sitting now, number one, quick question. So you're elected into your position, right?
Yes, yes, I am. I tell people we're like the United States, except a heck of a lot more civil.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, that's awesome.
My partners, each partner has a vote, and I'm elected by my partners.
Okay, and how long's your term?
You can do 2 4-year terms, and I just started my second 4-year term. Just started 2 months ago.
I'm very happy about that. You know, it's not every leader that I want to have a second term. You're one that I absolutely want to have a second term. So absolutely ecstatic about that. Yep. So as you know, from where you're sitting now at the top at PwC in the US, and thinking about also, you know, this side job you have, CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, and then, you know, also looking at where we know, and your graphic shows, you know, kind of at the top is where we really need to do work, because it in fact cascades down, and we both know that. What role can boards play, and what can the CEO do around their team? One of the things I was struck by when you got your appointment was, I remember reading about it in Race Ahead, in Ellen McGirt's piece, and you were sponsoring it. And then I clicked, and you had your team, pictures of your team. I remember that moment. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait a minute, because of what I saw. You know, I saw more than one Black person, you know, which was really strange for me. But so it was like, this guy gets appointed. I didn't know you then. And then bang, and I looked at this, and that's when I was like, I got to meet this guy. And so how did you make that happen? How did PwC make that happen? Because this is a real thing. And then if you could talk about boards and your experience on boards and what needs to happen there.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Thank you. So let me start with my leadership team. We have one of the most diverse leadership teams in corporate America. And I will even go a step further to say, when you look at the traditional power positions, it is incredibly diverse. And I think that's an important point that needs to be made. Again, if we're having the real conversation, oftentimes diversity will find itself into some of the functional areas on an executive team, but the lines of business. And I'm very proud to tell you that we have both. We have diversity among our functional leaders, and in our most important, powerful positions running our businesses. How do we get there? My predecessors deserve the credit. Like we have a dedicated, deliberate succession planning process in our firm that is well over a decade old, where people's careers are watched, managed, and they're given other opportunities to succeed, especially when you get to the point of, we have it at every level, but when you get to the point of partner, succession planning for an organization with 55,000 people is incredibly important. When I was elected, and one of the privileges of being when you're the senior partner, you get to you choose your team. I had an incredibly strong group of people to choose from, people who have been developed, given great opportunities, great mentorship, and I was a beneficiary of our succession planning, which is probably a good segue to boards. I would implore that boards put one marker in the ground, and that marker in the ground is an annual diversity inclusion strategic plan. And a well thought out plan is going to cover recruiting. It's going to cover retention. It's going to cover advancement, representation at all levels, measurement, pay equity, promotion, supplier diversity. It will cover measures of inclusion, of how people feel in the employee surveys. It's the umbrella that covers it all. What I worry about is in some organizations, they'll spend a lot of time talking about one of those topics. But the reality is it's a jigsaw puzzle, and you need all of those elements. So what I worry about is an over focus in one area. Do I think it's important for companies to get back to the communities? Absolutely. Do I think it's important for companies to do things outside their four walls? Absolutely. Or do I think pay equity is important? Absolutely. But those are just pieces. And the board should make sure they take a step back and say, we want to see the whole plan. And that plan ought to be measured internally. Now, companies can debate when they want to share it externally, but the board should see the numbers of where they are in terms of that progression on the entire strategy. I think that's really important. By the way, any other big business opportunity or problem, that's how you'd approach it. If you're thinking about entering a new market in Southeast Asia, you'd have a plan. You'd report on the status of that plan. So I think one of the biggest things boards can do is not get mystified by just one element of the plan. So if a CEO wants to give $50 million to a charitable organization, that's great, but they need to say, great job, but let's come back to the action part of the whole plan. So I think one of the most important things boards can do is focus on that plan. Now, Michael, if I can, I'd like to just share one thing on CEO action. Post George Floyd, prior to George Floyd, CEO action for diversity and inclusion was intentionally focused within the four walls of all of our companies. In other words, the strategy was, let's help each other get better with inside our four walls. And for the 1,200 members, we've all been learning from each other. The website is rich in data. We've had a number of physical, virtual gatherings, training, one-on-one sessions, all with the goal of getting better within our own four walls. It became very clear after George Floyd's murder that we as business leaders needed to do more outside our four walls in addition to the focus inside our four walls. And after consulting with several members, we made the bold step that we were going to form a group within CEO Action called CEO Action for Racial Equality. And we decided we were going to form a group that would work on public policy at the city, state, and federal level. And we invited all 1,200 members to contribute one or more fellows with those and they basically contribute one or more employees for a 2-year period to work as a startup, a scalable startup on public policy, because many companies by themselves can't affect public policy. They believe there's policy issues, but they can't affect it by themselves. But coming together as CEO Action and scaling it, we have an opportunity. So we launched that effort. PwC contributed the CEO. So Roy Weathers, who is on my leadership team, he ran the tax business. Now he's the CEO. Mass Mutual contributed a very senior woman, Pia Flanagan, to be the COO. We've built out an executive team. PwC is giving 30 fellows. And as I sit here today, we're at over 150, and the recruiting process is well underway. On October, we do all the onboarding, and then that team will spend 2 years working as bridge builders with our policymakers to try to improve public policy, amplify good policy, call out bad policy, and write new policy. That's a big, bold move that I think we believe the timing is right for the business community to play more outside the four walls, not just inside the four walls. And we're really excited about that.
Fantastic. Wow. So we'll bring Julian Lute back in, and I know he's going to queue up a couple of questions from our audience.
Great conversation, everyone, Tim and Michael, not just because I say so, but because of the quality and consistency of the questions that are coming through for both of you. So thank you for this. I'm gonna ask one clarifying question for you, Tim, and then I'm gonna ask for clarity, and then I'm gonna ask you another one. One question came through, Tim, around measures of success. So I was planning to refer people back to your diversity report and also your advice to boards around creating a D&I strategic plan and the contents of such to get a sense of what you believe to be measures of success. Is that fair to say that those are two indicators of how to measure success?
Yeah, Julian, absolutely. But one thing I would just expand on that. As we were preparing our diversity, inclusion, transparency report, we considered over 100 different metrics. But obviously that's overwhelming, and at some level it loses its meaning. We disclosed what we believe were most appropriate for our business. Now that may be different for other businesses. I'll give you an example. So one of our disclosures in our transparency report is the diversity of our partners who serve Fortune 500 companies, because in our business, that's an important metric. That may not be applicable in a technology company or consumer packaged good company. So I think there's some basic standard ones, such as our disclosure of diversity at every level. I think that's an important disclosure. But in other cases, it needs to be tailored to a company's specific business or their industry. And what we disclosed is very relevant for professional services. I think it's less relevant for, consumer packaged good companies. So that would be the only tweak I would make on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim, for that. Let's go to the next one. This was one that comes up very frequently, especially when we're in front of clients as well. We know that every company and every person is somewhere on this journey. So one of the questions that came through is, how do you connect with leaders and employees that don't value D&I, right? Or how do you onboard them or help a culture get ingrained that's not used to embracing D&I? Do you have any thoughts about how to help people at the beginning of this journey and when they're probably trying to get followers to cross that fence or at least approach the fence?
Yeah, Julian, thank you very much. I have a lot of thoughts on that. So I'll answer that both at the institutional level and then the personal level, if that's okay. I think at the institutional level, a company needs to understand that everybody is in different places. Some of us, like me, have had the privilege of being exposed to so much, both educational, personal experiences. Others have had less exposure to it. Doesn't make them bad people. They just had less exposure to it. Institutionally, an organization needs to create avenues for people to go on this journey. So, for example, CEO Action for the last 3 years, we've been sponsoring semi-annual days of understanding, and hundreds of companies have participated in those. That's a way to bring people along, to raise their awareness. There's not much good that has come out of George Floyd's murder, meaning it's hard to say a murder brings something good. But one of the good things that has happened is we're talking about it. And that's allowing people to learn more, which I think is critical. And what I'm encouraged by is how infuriated people are over that and so many other murders, because what happens is their journey goes faster. So I think institutionally, it's important for an organization to create avenues for people to learn. Sometimes that's formal training. Sometimes that's outside speakers. Sometimes that's people being vulnerable about what they've learned, but it's institutional. It's driven from the top down. That's critical. It's not one and done. One of the reasons I'm slightly optimistic today is I'm seeing more and more companies consistently do things institutionally to raise awareness. Now let me make it more personal. I think it's a responsibility of every human being and anybody who wants to lead people to engage and have dialogue. And oftentimes that is listening. And it's important as leaders to meet with people, understand how they feel, and then help both listen and educate, learn and pivot. And I'm going to give you a very real example that happened to me on Wednesday afternoon and today about an hour ago. So after we talk about diversity and inclusion all the time, PwC, we're not perfect. We have a lot of room for improvement. Very proud moment for us issuing the transparency report. I got hundreds and hundreds of emails from our people, mostly positive. Thank you. A lot more curious about additional data we might disclose, as you can imagine. One I got from a person, I had no idea who that person was, and they reached out to me and saying, I know, what about me? And they were white. What about me? Working class, never been to the dentist before I joined PwC because we couldn't afford it. Single mother, worked a dozen different jobs. So I had the privilege, I reached out to that person as I would love to get to know you more. And I spent a half hour with that person today by video and got to know that person a lot more. Like I learned about him, he learned about me, and we're both better off for it. I'm better, like my messaging. I think that everybody is important. Everybody is important. And so we need to be willing to listen and learn. And I stress listen too. I will adjust my messaging to make sure people like him don't feel left behind. Like that's not the intention. And so I would say at a personal level, leaders need to be, a leader's job is not to listen and tell someone why they're wrong. Like that's not leadership. That happens a lot, but that's not leadership. A leader's job is to listen, understand, and have a dialogue. And sometimes the leader's got to pivot a bit, and other times the person might go on that journey. So I think it's got to be both institutional and a constant commitment of leaders willing to listen and then to pivot where appropriate.
Thank you, Tim. I mean, I could ask another 15 questions, but I'm going to turn it back over to Michael for final thoughts. Thank you so much. Those were very vulnerable, heartfelt answers. Michael, final thoughts?
Yeah, Tim, just wanted to thank you, you know, on you know, two levels. One is, you know, what you're doing at PwC and showing that it can be done. And I know there's more work to do, but you and your team have done a lot of the hard work, and I know you're going to continue to do it. So it provides an example for all of us in terms of what we can do. And then the work you're doing for CEO action, you know, for diversity and inclusion. That's not easy work. Organizations are complex. Businesses are complex. So it's one thing to talk about society, businesses and their impact. It's tough. It's like telling or trying to influence another parent on how they're raising their kid. You know, it's like there's this wall, but you find a way to navigate that. And also your final point around, you know, sharing that story about someone feeling left out, you know. And so we talk about Great Place to Work for all for that reason. But the issue of race is such that it's tricky. It's complicated. And so if you say Great Place to Work for all, and then you talk about one ethnic group or racial group, there's gonna be a reaction. And so you are, as leaders, we have to lead through it. You know, we have to keep moving, not stop. You know, some people have had days of understanding and they're like, that's the last day of understanding. Okay, because we had a day of misunderstanding. Okay, we know that that's happening because people are learning how to do this, but this is the difficult work. You know, and I think that, like, your transparency, you know, in the report is what's needed now, which is uncomfortable inspiration. That's what it is, you know, because this is uncomfortable inspiration, which is going to be required, and our reluctance to do that is why we're kind of stuck, you know, in some ways. So just a thank you for leading, inspiring me, you know, at the same time, so we can inspire others, because we have a lot of complex work to do. And for your colleagues at PwC, I hope that they feel good about where they are, and we'll keep applying the pressure to get to where you want the organization to be. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Julian. And to all of you listeners, thank you for investing the time. It's a privilege to be able to speak with all of you. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Julian, go ahead.
I got you. Thank you, Tim. You know, your steady, accountable leadership over the years, you know, has been remarkable. And, you know, you mentioned something earlier about the willingness to have a real conversation, and we really appreciate that. I'm sure everyone on the line does as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We know that these last few weeks have felt at times tragic, but they definitely provide us the reason and the opportunity to focus on ensuring that we're creating a just, equitable, fair world for all. The recording and the summary will be shared early next week. There are some people who are asking for it immediately. They want to send it to their friends and family ASAP. You will get that in your email. Be sure to sign up on our Better Together landing page at greatplacetowork.com so you can stay in the loop and hear more about what we've been hearing and learning. As our global community continues to grow, you all are sharing the word about what you're getting from these conversations. So keep telling people and inviting your colleagues into these conversations as well. We also want to know what you're doing. So if you'd like to share your experience or you have additional questions, please send them to michael_bush@greatplacetowork.com. And on behalf of Great Place to Work, we want to thank Tim and PwC for the time and sharing their experience with all of us. And thank each of you for joining us today, because we know we are better together. Thank you.
Hey, Tim, you better clean that room up.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.